Okay. Good evening, everyone. And I just want to thank you very much for joining us this evening for the District Department of Transportation's virtual meeting on the Arboretum Bridge and Trail project. My name is Stacy Hemby from TVNA, and we handle the public outreach for this project. Before we start the presentation, I'd just like to go through a few meeting logistics with you. Joel, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. Um, First, I just want to let you know that the meeting is being recorded. It's also being streamed on DDOT's Facebook page. And following the meeting, I believe within 7 days, it will be posted to DDOT's YouTube channel as well. Next slide, please. During the presentation, everyone's mic except the presenters will be muted, and that's just to avoid background noise. And just so you're aware, and if needed, the WebEx platform does provide closed captions. To enable that feature, you can click on the three-dot icon, scroll down and select the closed caption option, making sure that the toggle switch is blue. Jarell, if you could go to the next slide. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. If you realize that you have a question or a comment during the presentation, there are a couple options to alert the team. The first being there is a hand raise option. To raise your hand, please click on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your center of the WebEx window. If you do not see this immediately, you should look for the three-dot icon and select raise hand. Jamel, I believe you can go to the next slide. Also, if you dialed in, pressing the *3 on your phone's keypad serves as a hand raise option and indicates to the project team that you would like to speak and ask your question. There is also another way to leave questions in the Q&A. This feature can be accessed by also clicking on the three-dot icon at the bottom right of your WebEx window. Select Q&A, or you may see a question mark icon. And last, you can leave your questions in the chat and make sure that they're marked to everyone. We will be monitoring both features as well as Facebook, and we'll do our best to answer all questions in the order in which they are received. Just to let you know, the meeting has a hard stop at 8:00 p.m., but if there are any questions that have not been addressed at that time, we will include them in a frequently asked questions document, which will be posted on the project website and also shared with you participants via email to the email where you use to log into the meeting. Last, really quick, I'd like to just ask that you complete a Title VI form for us at the end of the meeting. There are just a few quick questions, and we will direct you to that form at the end and also speak more about it at the end of the presentation. So thank you for your patience while I went through all of that, and I will now turn it over to Kyle Olson.
Excellent. Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate that. So good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We're excited to share this project update with you tonight. I am Kyle Olson with the DC Department of Transportation. My co-presenter is Joe Spadea with Panoni Associates, and we're also joined by representatives of the Department of Parks and Recreation and the National Park Service. We'll start off tonight talking about project location, and then we'll look at some site context, followed by trail design, and then bridge design. And then following all of that, we'll be happy to take your questions. So while I'm speaking, I'm going to turn off my camera in order to preserve audio quality. Give me just a moment. The project team consists of 3 lead agencies: the DC Department of Transportation, the National Park Service, and the DC Department of Parks and Recreation. We also have the project design team with Panoni Associates as the engineer of record, and then 3 sub-consulting firms, the public outreach being handled by Tina Boyd and Associates, the surveying being handled by CV Inc., and our environmental coordination by Strawn Environmental. So let's look at project location first. This proposed trail is located in the northeast quadrant of the district. It is a 1/2 mile long trail denoted by the heavy dashed blue line. And it's meant to connect Anacostia Park, Kenilworth Park North in Ward 7 on the east bank of the Anacostia River with the west bank of the Anacostia River in Ward 5, just north of Hickey Run and adjacent to the U.S. National Arboretum. We have several photos that we'd like to share to give some site context. And all of these photos have been taken by the project team. I guess just two I'd like to point out. Photo number 2 in the upper right-hand corner there, it gives a sense of the topography of the site. This is looking from the seawall on the east bank up toward Kenilworth Park. And so you can see the existing slope that is there. And then photo number 3 in the lower left corner, that's looking north along the tree line on top of Kenilworth Park. And the idea, if you look at the diagram here off to the left, you can see the solid green line denotes the proposed trail alignment. And the idea is that the trail would follow the tree line and not disturb the trees, but also stay clear of the existing sports fields. So I think on this slide, I'd like to highlight photo number 5. And this is looking on the west bank of the Anacostia River, looking east. So this is Park Service property. And one of the things that the Park Service emphasized to us at first was we need to preserve as much of the landscape as possible. So even though photo number 5 appears to show some trees that are in decline or have died, those are still really valuable habitat. And so the Park Service made it very clear to us that those trees need to remain. We should not consider those as something that can be removed. So we've been mindful of that, and we've worked very closely with the Park Service to make sure that what we're delivering is environmentally sensitive. Here, I'd like to show photo number 9, really, that's what I like to emphasize. This gives a much broader view of Kenilworth Park North. And again, we have the tree line there on the west side, or on the left side of the photo. And then to the right, it's the open area that is used for sports. And so if you can imagine the trail running alongside that tree line. We have a couple photos here to show the west bank of the Anacostia River. Now, this area is still National Park Service property. So the entire trail is proposed on National Park Service property. There's a small strip of land between the West River Bank and the U.S. Arboretum. So this is all Park Service property. There's an existing dirt trail on the west side, and we don't intend to improve all of that. However, the area that is overlapped with the solid green line, that's part of this proposed trail. That will be improved and will become a paved trail. Here's a rendering showing what the trail could look like. This is on the west bank, and it's looking north. So the Arboretum is off to the left side of the screen, and the demarcation line, the property line between the National Park Service and the Arboretum, is essentially where the taller trees start. You can see on the right side of the rendering, there's the, if you could go back a slide, thank you. So on the right side, there's the bridge in the distance. And so that's just the start of the crossing over the river. This is a pretty typical trail cross section. It will be 2 5-foot wide paved travel lanes. They're multi-use lanes, so it will be ADA accessible and compatible, open for anybody with bicycles, skateboards, wheelchairs, and people on foot. We also have 2 shoulders, earthen shoulders off to the side. And the unique thing here is because Kenilworth Park North is a former landfill site, we've been careful not to disturb those potentially sensitive soils. So this shows the trail being up on a few feet of embankment, 1 to 2 feet approximately, to make sure that we can construct the trail on top of the existing landfill soil without having to do much excavation that would result in potential unnecessary disturbance of that soil. There have been plenty of questions about trail safety. And so as part of this design, we will be including wayfinding signs at the trail junctions. And that's consistent with what exists on other parts of the Anacostia River Trail. We also will include post-mounted mile markers at the half-mile intervals and pavement markings with the mile markers at every 1/10 of a mile. Those markers will also include a trail abbreviation, a trail name abbreviation, so that in the event there's an emergency and someone needs to make an emergency call, you can read off the abbreviation and also the mileage, and that will help the emergency responders get to wherever help is needed. The trail is designed for light-duty emergency response vehicles, and again, that's consistent with other trails in the district. So this has been designed in accordance with FEMS requests, and it's our full intention to make this compatible with their needs. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Joe Spadea with Pannoni, and he'll talk about some bridge design.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kyle. My name's Joe Spadea. I'm the design consultant manager with Pannoni. We have been working together with DDOT and National Park Service and others throughout this process. So what I'm going to talk about here is, as with any design, there are constraints to the design that need to be looked at and considered. The couple of the big ones we have listed here. Obviously, the bridge and trail are within national park land. They are touching down on Kenilworth Park landfill. So one of the things that we needed to be mindful of was, when developing our design, that our foundations did not, I guess, include or call for excavating in the landfill. So our design, instead of excavating in the landfill, is looking at driving piles and grading up on top of, as Kyle mentioned earlier, up on top of the existing landfill. The other parameter that we have, and I'll show in the next slide, on either side of the bridge, on the Arboretum side and on the landfill side, there are two historic seawalls. And so when we looked at the design configuration and where to put the bridge supports and the abutments, we needed to consider the potential impact upon the seawall. The other thing is, the EA had called for a very minimalistic construction footprint. What that means is that if you're looking at this bridge from above, you don't want very large abutments, you don't want very large piers and elements that are going to cause a lot of disturbance. So we looked at a very minimalistic style pedestrian bridge. And that was also very important for a couple of other reasons. And one of those was, in the EA, there was a need to make sure that the bridge would complement park setting and be more of a naturalistic blend in with the park setting, and not be so large that it would compete with the canopy of the trees. So that was really important. And then obviously future maintenance was a concern for DDOT. We wanted to make sure that this bridge would be something that would not have so many components that would be required to be maintained, that it would be more of, again, a simplistic design. And then last but certainly not least, and we'll see this on the subsequent slides, the pier arrangement was key in order to straddle the Coast Guard channel. So there's a planned channel there, and we needed to make sure that we had provided enough clearance from the bottom of the bridge to the water, and also enough clearance laterally in the event that this would become a fully used and utilized by the Coast Guard. Another key stakeholder that we have communicated with throughout the process is the rowing community. And so we received feedback. We had a couple meetings with the rowing community and Park Service and DDOT. And in those meetings, we learned that there was really a need to make sure that we maintained 5 lanes, 2 of those being travel lanes north and south, and then a buffer in between. So what you're looking at here is kind of a flipped reverse view. So on the left-hand side, we're actually looking south. On the left-hand side is Kenilworth Park, and on the right-hand side is the Arboretum. And each arrow that you see there represents a 45-foot wide rowing lane. So on the left-hand side, you see 2 45-foot northbound lanes. On the right, you see the same going southbound. And then in the middle, we have a 45-foot buffer. So one of the key things, if we look at the original span configuration that came from the EA, and when we overlaid the rowing lanes and we took a look at the channel, one of the immediate needs was to address that Pier 2. And by the way, just a quick before I go further, a little bit of bridge anatomy for folks that may be new to understanding the components of a bridge. So at the very bottom of the bridge, we have our foundation, and then building up out of the water, the columnar shapes that you see there, and one of those is highlighted in red. Those are called bridge piers. And then on the left and right-hand side, where the bridge touches down on ground, those are what we refer to as bridge abutments. And these are numbered sequentially from the left side to the right side. So you have abutment 1, and then the next you have Pier 1, then you have Pier 2, which is highlighted in red, Pier 3, and then abutment 2. So one of the challenges we immediately saw, and if you call your attention to the blue text at the bottom, the 90-foot, 45, and 90-foot rowing lanes, we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be impeding on those. So this was the original concept, and then what we did look at was shifting the bridge. So next slide, please. So what we did, we had discussions with the Coast Guard about alleviating the clearance requirements, the buffer that was part of previous designs. And so in this configuration, we have 2 clear rowing lanes going through 120-foot spans. And the center Pier 2 is located within the 45-foot buffer. We then thought further about this in trying to address some of the feedback from the water users, and we try to look at, could we make Pier 3, which is on the right side, and if we go to our next slide, could we take that Pier 3 and slide it even further and put it in line with the seawall? We did get feedback, unfortunately, from the Historic Preservation Office, because the seawall was considered historic. We were asked to not do that. We were asked to make sure we minimize the impact, if any, to the seawall. And so from there, from where we currently see, and by the way, the span lengths we have here are 132 foot. And if we go to the next slide, ultimately what we ended up doing was pulling that pier back from the seawall, and that's highlighted in red, just so that we would minimize disruption to the seawall. However, we tried to maximize, again, the channel clearance and the clearance between the piers. So for the sake of scale, between piers 1 and 2, which is called span 2, and between piers 2 and 3, which we refer to as span 3, there's 123 feet between those. And for comparison, just for the sake of scale, that's the equivalent of the length of an A320 Airbus plane. So it is a pretty sizable span. And again, going from the original span length, which was 120, we've increased that. We've shifted things around to make sure that the center pier would not impede the 4 rowing lanes. Again, this is a rendering of the bridge. This is looking from Kenilworth Park towards the US Arboretum. And a couple things I'll call out. I'll go back to the bridge anatomy kind of 101. The objects rising up from the river that are concrete and stone, those are what we refer to as the bridge piers. And then the orange colored element there, which is what we refer to as the girder. And so the girders, there's three main steel girders that support the deck, which is the portion where the folks would, bike, walk, etc. So the design team has been working on this with DDOT and National Park Service, as mentioned. We anticipate completing the design this fall. We anticipate construction beginning in the fall of the following year of 2024. And construction completion, we anticipate around 2026. This is an animation that will show, and again, this is an animation of an actual 3D digital twin of the bridge. So the you can proceed with the video. I'll just talk over it. That's fine. So what you're looking at here is going towards the Arboretum. This is a shot looking north. On the left is the Arboretum. On the right is the trail connection through Kenilworth Park. Again, looking towards the Arboretum. And then this is a view looking north, coming down the Anacostia River, or I should say going up the Anacostia River. There's the channel, the navigational channel, identified by those red and green lights. The north side here being the Arboretum. Top of screen is the Arboretum. And then this is a view looking north from Kenilworth Park towards where there's currently most folks will launch a kayak into the river. This is a view walking on the Arboretum side, heading north. The bridge is off to the right in the background there. And then this is a final shot just showing what the bridge looks like again from the river. All right, back to you, Stacy.
Okay, thanks, Joe. All right, everybody. So on the screen now, we have our project contact information. As always through the process, we want to make sure that you know who to send comments and questions to. At the end of this presentation, we will have an open comment and question period that will extend for 30 days through August 27th. So if you have anything that you want to send, please send it to me. I am Stacy, and my email address is stacy@tbaconnects.com. I'll also drop that in the chat before the end of the meeting, but it's STACEE at TB as in boy, A as in apple, CONNECTS.com. The project manager on the DDOT side is Kyle Olson. His email address is kyle.olson@dc.gov. Spelling of his name is KYLE.OHLSON. And then also Joe Spadea, who you just heard from, is the consultant design manager, and his email address is jspadea@pannoni.com. That's JSPADEA@PENNONI.com. Again, all questions though should be sent to me just so we can track that and make sure that you get answered, and also that they're included in the frequently asked questions. Okay, so this officially concludes the presentation. On the screen right now, we have the Title VI form that we're asking you to complete at the end of the presentation. Please take a moment to scan the QR code so that you're able to access the sheet. Just a few quick questions. It's required for all DDOT meetings, and we really appreciate it. The link to join is also at the top of the screen. That's rebrand.ly/Arboretum Bridge and Trail comments July 2023. I can drop that in the chat as well. And but the easiest way, of course, is to do the QR code. So thank you for that. The meeting, just a few quick reminders, and then we'll go straight in. The meeting ends at, again, 8 o'clock. If your question is not answered during the meeting, we will include them in an FAQ sheet. I also like to note that we have received some pre-meeting questions. They will also be included in the FAQs. Unless there's some discussion surrounding them that you'd like to have on the meeting, you can definitely rest assured that we will answer those and email them back, and also include them in the FAQs. So you don't necessarily have to include them in the chat. I think that was a question in there. As I mentioned, there's a 30-day period to please send your comments and questions to me. A quick review of some WebEx logistics. People have been leaving them in the chat. You can also leave them in the Q&A or raise your hand. If you're dialing in, you need to press *3 on your phone's keypad to raise your hand. We'll unmute your mic, and when it's your turn, let you speak. And if you could just state your name and your before stating your question. The last reminder, again, is just about the Title VI form, and then we will go ahead and jump into Q&A. So most of the questions have come through the chat. I'll start there. And the first question has already been answered about if you submitted written questions from Susan. If you submitted written questions in advance of the meeting, do you need to retype them? No, you don't have to retype them here unless you need some discussion or further explanation from the team. So we'll go on to Jeffrey's question. Is anyone else, oh, I'm sorry, that's about audio issues. So hopefully everyone's good with audio. If you're not, please put something in the chat. Okay, and the next question we will go to is, so I'll just read through. Susan, I did receive your questions, and we can definitely read those. Let me know in the chat if you'd like for us to go through those, and I'll go back to them. I know you asked that question to start. A question from the Anacostia River Keeper. It should be noted that those trees along the NPS right-of-way around Photo 5 have been completely neglected, turning them into a massive kudzu tangle, killing the trees and threatening many more trees inside the USDA fence line on the property that remained to the National Arboretum inside of NPS's right-of-way. The demonstrated failure heretofore in the maintenance in this area is one large concern about this project if it moves forward. Team, you have any response for that?
Hey, good evening. This is Kyle Olson. I'll say we certainly understand that kudzu is a significant challenge, and we will work with the Park Service if they give us some direction regarding kudzu or any other invasive species that are within the limits of disturbance, meaning the footprint of this trail. If there's something that we can do, we're happy to look at it. There are certainly parts that are outside of the trail footprint that we will not be able to. But yes, we understand that, and thank you for noting that.
All right, thank you, Kyle, for the answer to that question. The next question from Bob is the bridge cross section shown looking north or south?
So I think that question came up in one of the structure slides. It might have been the bridge design constraint slide when Joe was speaking. And if that's the one, I think it might have been slide 16. I think that's when I saw that question pop up. So if you were referring to this slide, this one is looking north. And again, this came from a separate document. This was from one of the planning documents. But yeah, this is looking north.
Kyle, the subsequent slides also are looking north, where we show the span arrangement.
Yeah, so here, this is also looking north. Yes, thank you, Joe.
Okay. Thank you to you both for the answer. I'm going to jump to Q&A where we have one question that came in around this time from Miriam. Why are the baseball fields being preserved? Will this park not be improved over its current condition?
This is Kyle. I can start just by saying, as part of this trail, we don't want to impede the current use of the park, right? So, and that's something that came from the Park Service, right? They've been very clear to us that we want to keep those sports fields. As far as future uses go, is there somebody from the Park Service that might be able to give a little more detail?
Hey Kyle, this is Mike. I'm currently on from the Park Service. Hi everybody, this is Mike Caniso. I'm the Deputy Superintendent over at National Capital Park Chiefs. Just wanted to clarify, those said the current permitted areas are part of the larger transfer that will be occurring here in the near future. However, it's still under Park Service jurisdiction at this point. And we are doing our best to make sure that the bridge in its current location is consistent with what was within the EA, as well as some of the plans that DDOT has developed over the last 10 to 15 years. So that is my answer for that, Kyle.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Thanks, Kyle. The next question that we have, and Mike, if you could just go back on mute to avoid the background noise. Thank you. The next question that we have is in the chat. Okay, and it is on the subject of design constraints. It would be much better for the river if the design included excavation of the landfill and restoration of the wetland, which was there until just over 100 years ago. Any comment, follow-up to that, team?
The design that we've shared tonight, it's consistent with the environmental assessment. And the guidance there was that we should avoid the landfill area if possible, because it is environmentally sensitive. So if you remember the trail cross-section that we had shown, that's up on some fill. Again, we're trying to avoid that environmental disturbance. We understand, that this is a former landfill site and it was all wetland at one point. But we're following the guidance, the planning documents that have been previously developed.
Okay, thank you for that follow-up, Kyle. The next question or comment is from the Anacostia Riverkeeper. This would match up with the district's own intention to restore wetland along the river edge of Kenilworth Park North, improving resiliency and reducing flood risks for the many homeowners currently in the flood plan along Watts Branch. Any comment from the team on that?
Yeah, DDOT is aware. We've been working with the Park Service and others regarding the district's plan overall to restore those wetland areas. So what we've shown you tonight does not preclude any of that work in the future, right? There is a planned wetland area that this does not conflict with that. So it could work, it can work well together.
All right, thank you, Cal. So just a comment from Bob says, thank you for listening. We appreciate that, Bob. And the next question is, unfortunately, statement is, unfortunately, the enormous concrete pier supported bridge proposed completely fails to use the only existing model for a pedestrian/cyclist bridge across the Anacostia River using 0 dangerous piers in the river itself. An excellent model, if only it hadn't been thrown out in design. Does anyone from the team have a comment that they'd like to say for that?
Kyle, this is Joe. I can answer that question. So we did look at several different configurations during design, and the one configuration where we would span completely over Anacostia River was prohibitive, and it was prohibitive for a couple reasons. One of them being on the on the west side where the Arboretum Bridge is, the distance between the property line of the U.S. Arboretum and the seawall at the Anacostia River is limited. With a larger design, with a larger crossing, to be able to bring the trail back down the grade in that area is prohibitive. The other element of having a long span bridge is that the abutments would be much larger. And again, recalling some of the constraints that I discussed earlier, we wanted to make sure that we minimized the footprint of the structure. And then also we were limited in what we could do in terms of excavation. And so a clear span bridge over this part of the Anacostia River would have required much larger foundations and would have been prohibitive.
All right, thank you, Joe, for answering that question. The next question I have is from Marion, and it says, was the river ever considered in this design? It is scenic and wild. This bridge does not complement this site.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So DDOT and the Park Service have worked together. We got some direction early on from the Park Service that whatever the design ended up being, it needed to be sensitive to the natural environment. And so the color scheme that you've seen in the rendering, that dark brown, dark orange color of the girders, that's consistent with what the Park Service likes to see. In addition to that, we've also worked with the Commission of Fine Arts, and they gave us a number of constraints as well. So they wanted it to be a minimal design, to have the least obstruction of the view shed as we could possibly achieve. That's the reason for the railing. The railing is essentially transparent. You can hardly tell it is there from a distance. And then again, the color scheme also is consistent with what the Commission of Fine Arts had asked about in order to your question, Marion, to preserve as much as possible the natural site.
Thank you so much for that, Kyle. Okay, and thank you, Marianne, for your question. Okay, the next one is from Katie, and after this question, we'll go take a couple hand raises. So will there be dredging so these rowing lanes will actually be able to be used? Not all water that you see is rowable due to the buildup of sediment everywhere up and down the river. And the rowing lanes that were just shown, rowers on the outside lanes would have to very quickly cut into the center of the river so they didn't run aground.
There is no dredging proposed as part of this particular trail effort. We understand that there is a much larger dredging discussion going on, and there's a plan for that. This project has been designed with the dredging in mind. So the foundation is such that any dredging that is done will not have any effect on the structure. It's perfectly fine to do dredging to maintain those channels, to maintain that river bottom, and the structure will be just fine. And yes, we understand that there are concerns with dredging. Keep in mind, these are not highway piers, right? They're much, much smaller than that. So I know there are highway crossings along the river. And there is a lot of sediment associated with those, but these are significantly smaller.
Okay, thank you for that, Kyle. Patrice, can you please unmute the first hand raised? I believe it was from Anacostia Riverkeeper.
Hey y'all, thank you for the unmute. I've raised most of my points already in the chat. I do have a couple really important process things, some of which Stacy, you and I corresponded on before, but I didn't get a complete answer on. Number one, you did respond about the funding breakout and that this is about 83% federal funding with a 17% local jurisdiction match. My understanding of federal funding for projects of this scale is that there are some minimum noticing requirements for any kind of public outreach. You know, notably that there be multiple meetings at any given phase. You know, if this was a 2-year project total, that'd be one thing, but this is going on a 6 or 8 year project total. And the idea that public meetings that were held 2 and even 3 years ago get to count towards the amount of public hearings we need right now, when a lot of people are entering this for the first time, and none of us have seen the new design that came out of the jump from 30 to 60%, I think is false, and I think it may even be illegal. I think multiple public outreach meetings are a requirement, not just a preference. But I would like to know the agency's understanding, both DDOT and NPS and DPR, of bare minimum noticing requirements for this project because of the federal local mix. Further, on the same note, my understanding is also that such projects require no less than 30 days notice, not only a 30-day minimum comment period, but also a 30-day notice for meetings. As many people here will remember, we were only given 9 calendar days notice the first time this meeting was attempted at the end of April, looking for a May date. And my understanding is that meeting was only canceled, not because of the problems with public noticing, but because some speakers were unavailable last minute. That's my first question. You know, how do the agencies understand their noticing requirements based on the mixture of local and federal funding going into a project of this scale?
So I guess I can start speaking for DDOT here. As far as I know, we have met the noticing requirements for community meetings, and we have folks that we work with that specialize in community engagement, community outreach. So we follow their guidance, and as far as I know, we have met that guidance. Had we not met their standards, met our own standards, they would not have allowed us to advertise the meeting as we did.
Respectfully, you originally gave 9 calendar days notice for the first attempt at this meeting, and my understanding was that, you know, informal rules within DDOT alone state no less than 2 weeks notice to public for a meeting. So I presume that's what was attempted, and I know there's a lot of moving parts with the various consultants and the many agencies and everybody having to collaborate together, but that's not what we've seen in this process, and it seems like the agencies are rushing this process, and I don't understand why. But I would like to get a formal answer on the record at some point. It doesn't have to be right now if no one has it in writing, but I would like to know what the actual rules are for public notice.
As the communication and engagement person for DDOT, the rule is a basic 10-day notification. And as you've already summarized, some of our partners were not available because they had to attend to emergencies within their own agency groups. And we were trying to make this a holistic meeting, meaning all parties, NPS, DPR, DDOT, will be able to be present. So questions that were specific to each unit could be addressed correctly. The other part of the standards is that we do a 30% design and we have a meeting, but it doesn't restrict us from having meetings during the 30% or 65%. to invited organization meetings. So sometimes we have our 30% design, but we've also participated in the local ANC meetings. We've presented at their meetings. We're presented at other groups. Even if you had invited us to present just to your group that is specific, we would have done so and we'll be able to do so during the next period as we're trying to move to 100%. So it is 10 days.
Is that 10 calendar days or business days?
We call it 10 business days. We count Monday through Friday. We don't include Saturday and Sunday.
Cool, thank you. That matches what I understood informally. Is that still the law for a federally funded project?
It's the standard and policy and law for local as well as federal projects.
Thank you. My other point of process that I wanted to raise is the environmental impact study. I forget now exactly what year it was. I believe it was late 90s. It may have been early 2000s, but it's on either side of the 2-decade mark, as I understand it. If y'all could confirm, yeah, got my.
Hey Trey, yeah, the public scoping for the EA began in 2011, and it concluded, well, specifically February 3rd, 2011, and concluded March 4th, 2011. So there was a public scoping period that was posted. It was on our Pepsi website, and then it was made available for public review and comment on December 20th, 2011 through January 31st, 2012. So also, this was, I know there was a comment about it being incomplete. We reevaluated it again and found that, looking at the direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts associated with the action was current with the existing conditions. We also sent that to the Anacostia Watershed Community Advisory Committee in 2020. And I can share that letter again with you, Trey, following this meeting if need be. That provides a little bit more information.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, thank you, team, for that. And Trey, we will definitely provide a written response and include it in the FAQs. And
Thank you,
also,
Stacy. I had a follow up on the EIS though, if I can still.
Sure, yes.
I'm glad to hear it was more recent than I thought. That's good to know. I still, because of its timing, before any of the advocates ever lobbied DC Council for the funding to begin the Anacostia River Sediment Project, there was no discussion of the massive capping and dredging work to remediate toxics in the river, including areas almost immediately adjacent, just barely downriver of the proposed bridge site. And also, we only just last year saw the recorded statement for Kenilworth Park North's remediation by Park Service, and the comments that detail a start to a plan by the district for restoring wetlands along the edge, including right up to the seawall where this bridge is proposed. Because of these significant differences from now and these big projects on the river and behind the seawall, I think it's time for an addendum to the environmental impacts study. I'm glad it's only a decade old and not 2 decades old, but even at a decade old, it misses several of these major changes that have happened, some 7 years ago, some just in the past year. And I think to really be completely legally safe, the EIS could stand an addendum. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you for those comments, Trey. And we will move to the next hand raise. Graylin, Patrice, can you unmute Graylin? Graylin, you should be unmuted. Patrice, is Graylin unmuted?
He's unmuted now.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, I missed probably the first half of the presentation. The link in the PDF flyer turns out was only generating downloads of the flyer. It wasn't actually taking me to the WebEx. Thankfully, I was able to call someone else who happened to be attending the meeting. They sent me the link, and when I tried to use it, I got a redirect message. This is all on my desktop. I got a redirect message, and so it wasn't working either. That's when I thought, well, it's saying something about download when I click on it. So let me see what's being downloaded. Maybe it's an executable, a file, but it was only a PDF. So then I tried the link on my phone, my smartphone, and it worked. Unfortunately, it means that I have to kind of flip between screens to be able to see the chat. And the chat is confined to basically 1 or 2 lines because the keyboard takes up the rest of the space. What I'm getting at is, if we're going to have a public meeting, then the public should be able to access the meeting to the best of their ability. I'm trying here. I don't like attending such meetings with my phone because of the limited functionality of the phone. I prefer desktop so I can see slides, see the chat, use my keyboard, much more functionality. If I sound a bit upset, I am. Will this, it says it's recorded. Will the recording be available to the public? Perhaps I can review the recording before I submit my comments, but I don't want to make comments about something I don't know that much about, because I got into the meeting halfway through the presentation.
All right, thank you for your comments, Braylon. We apologize for the technical difficulties that you had. Definitely, just in the future, there's usually a number. If you're having technical difficulties, you can definitely dial in. I think you've been on a few of our meetings, so I can give you my personal number as well. And that way, if you're having issues,
Yeah, I saw the number, but to call the number, I have to leave the meeting.
Okay, well, we will be posting the presentation following the meeting. Also, it's streamed live on Facebook, so you can also go back and listen to the recording and see the presentation at the same time via on DDOT's Facebook page. And we can definitely connect after the meeting to address any questions or concerns that you have. There's also a 30-day period where we have an opening to submit comments and questions as well. Did you have any other question for us?
No, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing the entire presentation.
You're very welcome. All right. Thank you for that. And we'll take one more hand raise before we go into back to the chat. From, looks like D. Isaac was next. Patrice, can you unmute D. Isaac?
Go ahead, D. Isaac, you're unmuted.
D. Isaac, are you still there? Okay, we'll try to come back to you. Let's try Robert. What's next on the list? Patrice, can you unmute Robert and let me know when he's unmuted? Is Robert unmuted?
He's not. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, while if you're not able to get Robert
I don't
unmuted.
see him on the call any longer.
Okay, let's do one quick question from the ANC and then we'll move back to the chat. Ebony Payne.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I wanted to ask what DDOT, how much outreach has DDOT done for 7D? I believe I'm the only commissioner on this call from 7D. I was sworn in January. This is my first term, and I think I've seen one meeting request, in the 6 months that I've been commissioner. I do have constituents on both sides of the issue, but when I spoke with the commissioner whose SMD this bridge actually touches, they had not really been engaged on this particular issue. And I also want to highlight that this project impacts not just 7D, but 5D. So that's 2 wards. And oftentimes when projects happen and they affect 2 wards, a lot can get lost. So I just want to make sure that the communities that this is supposed to be connecting are really have as much opportunity to voice their concerns, because at this point, it doesn't seem like from the ANC's level that we've gotten much communication thus far.
So I'll start with that answer and maybe some other team member would like to join in, but just to let you know, like the notice for this meeting, engagement for this meeting was sent to every one in 7D and 5C, second, and 5D as well. And then also as a courtesy to some surrounding ANCs, but those are the ones that were immediately impacted. So we reached out to, those ANC commissioners. Is there anything that the team would like to add?
And while someone's speaking, I do actually have a Commissioner Alcorn from Hill East on the call. And he did note that DDOT did present for about 5 minutes in April on the project, but there obviously just needs to be more engagement for constituents to really have their voices heard.
Okay, so, and I'll let someone jump in. Thank you for that. And I'll let the rest of the team jump in as well. Just to note a couple other things. I know there have been changes in commissioners, but prior to, in our first round of engagement, we have held 2 meetings in person and also engaged the commissioners back then and held meetings for the rowing community at request. And also just email engagement throughout. So if anyone else has anything else to add to answer the commissioner's question.
I was just indicating.
Yeah, Stacy, this is Kyle Olson with DDOT. Just in addition to what Stacy had mentioned, if there are questions or comments, please, send them our way. Right? You can see on the screen here, Stacy Hemby is our outreach coordinator. So if you can direct anything to her, we'll be happy to respond to it if there is something specific from one of the ANCs that perhaps we overlooked or we haven't satisfactorily answered.
Thank you, Kyle. Anything else from the team or Do you have any other questions, Commissioner Payne?
Trying to just add,
Oh, Ms. Paul, we can hear you, but it's low.
I just wanted to say that what we will do is send the presentation link 10 days after this meeting to every individual commissioner and encourage them to review it and then submit comments during the 30-day comment period. And if we have any flexibility, which I believe we do, Commissioner, to attend your meetings when you rejoin your, I know 7D meets again in September. We can also come and share what your comments are. But we're hopeful when we send these links to ANCs and organizations that they put them on their website, they share them with their listserv and encourage people to please look at them and review them. We've been coming out time and time again, and as Kyle indicated, he had engaged with other groups who invited them to present at their meetings. So we're not shy to share more information. We just need that invitation from you.
All right, thank you, team, and thank you, Commissioner Payne. We'll go back to the chat for some additional questions. We have a question from Susan. Won't sand/mud accumulate around the piers over time?
Joe, is that a question that you can answer?
Yeah, we can take a shot at it. So the sand actually around piers, typically you will get some scour, but the stream being this reach of the river being very straight, very constrained on the east and west by seawalls, will naturally just have I wouldn't say a net zero effect, but you have aggregation and degradation happening up and downstream at these reaches. But we can certainly put together a more refined response for you.
Okay, and that will be included in the frequently asked questions. So we'll go to the next question in the chat. During the couple of meetings the design team held with the rowers and other river users, the design team consistently failed to hear the actual comments submitted. The river is half the width pictured at low tide twice a day, every day. No piers are acceptable in this design. So that was a comment. Is there anyone on the team that would like to respond to that? A second part to that is it should also be noted that the State Historic Preservation Office does not bar the covering or removal of the seawall. They do ask for mitigation if a project disturbs the seawall. And that would finish up on Anacostia River Keeper's statement. Any response?
Stacy, I'll respond. I'm sorry, did I talk over somebody?
No. You're good, Kyle.
So to the first point, we have heard the comments, and we've tried to reach a design that balances the multiple users, because there are many, as we all know. So what we've presented, what we've shared, is that effort. It's the result of that effort. And over the past few years, we've actually spent quite a bit of time consulting with the Historic Preservation Office, with the National Park Service, and with the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the seawall. So there has been a lot of discussion there. There's a lot of sensitivity there. And you're correct. The Historic Preservation Office does not bar the covering or removal. And you're correct, they do ask for mitigation. After talking with them, the issue that we did run into was as Joe had shown on one of the slides, we were hoping that we might be able to make the third pier integral with the seawall. They did object to that. And so that was a driving factor in this design.
All right, thank you for that, Kyle. The next statement is from Marion. Please do not try to suggest that this design is acceptable for the boating community. Is there any, it's a statement, but just wanted to know that the team have anything they wanted to add. If not, I'll go to the next question. Okay, we have from Adam. Unfortunately, it's not surprising that the rich white rowers driving in from Montgomery County get their own private meetings with the engineers. The engineers then bend over backwards for them, but they still continue to attempt to scuttle safety infrastructure with no concern for the ongoing risk for local Ward 7 residents. Is there a comment from the team behind that?
I'll just add, Stacy, again, there are many different users. And so DDOT, in close coordination with the Park Service, we have tried to reach a design that accommodates everybody as best as we can.
Okay, thank you for that, Kyle. We will go back to the hand raisers because I see D. Isaac, looks like he may be ready. Patrice, can you unmute D. Isaac? And let
He was unmuted. I'm not sure what happened.
D. Isaac, are you able to speak? You're unmuted. Okay, there may be some technical difficulties. If you're not able to answer your question, I just want to kind of restate that you can definitely reach me after the meeting via email, and my email will be in the chat, but it's Stacey, STACEE @tbaconnects.com. I'll go back to the chat. Actually, let's take Pat Jackman. Can you unmute Pat, Patrice? Are you able to unmute Pat, Patrice?
It looked like Pat was unmuted, but there was no mic. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I lost you for a moment. My name is Pat Jackman, and I am a river trail user, and I also ride bikes on the Anacostia River Trail. And I'm all supportive of connecting the communities on the east to the west side of the river. But I would appreciate knowing more about the trail on the west side, the bike trail, from the perspective we see. It seems like the bridge goes to kind of to nowhere. There is the Arboretum. And we all know, and there's several of the questions throughout the chat, that the Arboretum has federal hours. You're 8 to 4:30. How is the community going to be able to pass through? Does the bike trail pass through the Arboretum, or does it skirt around the outside and people have to go in the main gate? Could you clarify that, please?
Thank you for that question. So this is an important point. The trail that we have proposed, again, is all on Park Service property, but it does run up to the gate at the Arboretum. As you mentioned, the Arboretum is a federal property. It is not a park. And so they have regular business hours. They do close every afternoon. I believe it's at 5 o'clock. So for right now, when this trail is built, that will remain the case. And so there will be free passage onto the Arboretum ground. They welcome that during the times when they are open. Outside of that, for now, that access will be restricted. There is a plan that our bicycle team is working on to continue that connection to the west so that Matt meets up with Maryland Avenue. And the intention there is to skirt around the Arboretum so that that trail connection will be available regardless of the Arboretum's hours. But again, the whole Anacostia River Trail network is being built sequentially. And there's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of funding that must be acquired first. And so as those pieces fall into place, we then advance the planning, the design, the construction. So this is just the next segment in that overall robust build out.
Thank you for that, Kyle. We will move to the next question in the chat. This design is this design is incredibly dangerous to people using the waterway and needs to be paused until alternatives have been effectively considered as required by law. This basic requirement of the environmental impact study was not properly conducted, and the agency's first responsible step should be a new environmental impact study, or at the very least, an addendum to the original EIS from 2 decades ago. That was a comment. If you have anything, team, to say, if not, I will move to the next question. Any response to that? Okay. Next one is from Elizabeth. I'm new to the discussion and so far hugely disappointed. I don't understand why this presentation didn't start with at least a brief explanation of the demand for this bridge and why planners have any reason at all to think it's needed or wanted. Any response to Elizabeth's comment?
Sure, and thank you for that comment. This, as I was just mentioning, is part of the Anacostia.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You're a little bit low right now. We could hear you before, but this time you're a little low.
Is this better?
Yes, much better.
So thank you for highlighting that. You know, as I just mentioned, this is part of the larger Anacostia River Trail network. And if you go back to 2003, there's the Anacostia Framework Plan. And that spells out the overall revitalization, rejuvenization of the Anacostia River and its waterfronts. It includes recreational uses, transportation uses, and many other, it considers many other factors as part of the overall revitalization plan. So this crossing was part of that plan. And it's available online. You can look up Anacostia Waterfront Framework Plan. It's a great document. Again, it goes back to 2003. But these long-range planning documents, right? They have a vision, and it takes a long time to implement them. So that's what's driving this. That's the source of this. That's how this was determined.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. And the next question from the chat is from Shanna. Will people still be able to launch a kayak and or other boat?
I can answer that, Kyle. So at present, compared to the existing with no bridge and with the bridge added, we won't be limiting access to where people currently enter.
All right, thank you, Joe. From LT, we have, this bridge looks great, and I look forward to being able to easily and safely use it to walk and bike to the Arboretum. Thank you for that, LT. We appreciate it. The next question is from John, and it says, once you go to the end of the trail in the Arboretum, is there any connection to other trails along the West Bank?
There's only the existing trail, the dirt trail along that west bank. There's no plan to add any trails. As I was just mentioning, eventually there will be a connection to the west, which would link up with Maryland Avenue, but that's not part of this effort.
Thank you, Kyle. The next statement is from Brent, and he just states that the bridge looks great. And then we go to, thank you, Brent. Then we go to Eva. Rowers are excellent stewards of the river. We pick up trash daily. We see the river through all the seasons, high tides, low tides. We understand the nuances of the river. Thank you for that statement. And the next is from Grant. I am a DC resident and I row on this part of the Anacostia about 2 times per week. And this bridge design will have severe adverse impacts on my use and that of all the other river users. The center pier will cause unacceptable sedimentation in the river, and the left span has a 2-foot depth, which is useless for navigation. Rowers have been using the river for decades, and this design completely fails to take that use into account. It will cut the river in half as far as rowing uses are concerned. And I definitely think we've heard that comment before. I think it's been addressed. Anything to add before I go to the next statement or question? Okay, the next statement is, I'm very excited to be able to walk and or bike from what is essentially my backyard to the Arboretum. Thank you for keeping this project going. Thank you, we appreciate your comment. And the next statement, I'm gonna go to the Q&A. We have a question there and I'll come back. Will there be 24-hour access to both sides from Zandra? And will the Arboretum, when the Arboretum is closed, is there public access? Is the public access limited? I'm sorry.
Is there someone from the Park Service who can speak to the access question for Park Service land?
Sure, Kyle, this is Mike. For the most part, the majority of our lands, it's and you can refer to our NACE compendium, the superintendent's compendium. It's from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. In the evenings. However, nobody's. I've seen people utilizing our after hours after 10 p.m. But technically, it's 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. in those areas.
All right, thank you for that, team. So we have a question from Jennifer in the chat. Has the tidal flux been considered with the bridge span and height design proposal? Did the team review an option where you have no piers in the water to accommodate the low tide periods? I believe a part of that has been answered, but team, would you answer the rest of it?
Joe, are you able to give some detail on the tidal flux portion?
Yeah, so we did, we were cognizant that this is a tidal waterway. And so for the design of the bridge itself, that tidal change was considered as part of our H&H, which is hydraulics and hydrology analysis. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry, Stacy.
The second part of the question was already answered, I believe, but did the team review an option where you have no piers in the water to accommodate the low tide periods?
Yes, correct. We did cover that previously.
Okay, and next question from Michael. Will users be able to enter the Arboretum from the trail after crossing the bridge? There's no gate on that side of the park at the moment, unless I'm mistaken. Will one be built?
To my knowledge, there is a gate between the Park Service property and the Arboretum. And so that is on the existing trail. Users will be able to enter the Arboretum and cross from the Arboretum to the trail and vice versa during the time when the Arboretum is open.
Okay, and we have a couple statements next. I'll just read these and just note that we are at the 10-minute before meeting close mark, so I just want to try to cover as much as we can. But a statement from Marion is there are many more issues at stake here than boaters. Restoration and resiliency need to be addressed. And then we have a statement from Adam. Rowing shells are very expensive. Rowers' aesthetic preferences should not outweigh the physical safety of DC residents. D. Isaac has a question. And I believe D. Isaac, we've been trying to unmute you, so I want to make sure we get this. Good afternoon. In your design plans, have you considered the amount of traffic that currently uses the trail to assess the width that would be needed to safely allow for walkers, joggers, and bikers?
Kyle, I can address that. The answer is yes. The trail network is consistent with the other parts of the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail. On the bridge itself, we're going to allow a total width of 14 feet. So there will be 2 5-foot travel lanes plus 2 feet on either side to allow pedestrians and bikers to pull over and enjoy the view.
Thank you, Joe. The next statement is, it's a vital transportation artery that connects the landlocked communities sandwiched between the river and 295. Thank you for that comment. And let's see. We have another comment from Marion that I'll read through. The ART already provides a paved throughway across Kenilworth Park, which connects east to the West Bank sections via the Benning Road Bridge. This bridge has benefited from significant investment to improve the pedestrian experience and provide safe travel for both pedestrians and bicycles. How can it be justified to provide another connection across the river, a dead end at that, through a long promised park which has received absolutely no improvements, and before even one project has been discussed or planned to provide safe access to Kenilworth Park and the river for residents on the east side of the river, including those east of Kenilworth Ave and the RR tracks, railroad tracks. So there was a question there, team. Is there an answer to that question, team?
Yeah, Stacy, this is Kyle. So I was reading the question again because there was a lot there, but I think we'll probably have to follow up in a response separately. I will just say briefly that we're looking at the long-range Anacostia waterfront framework plan. And of course, the goal is to build a robust, equitable, and safe transportation network. And so this fits within that. But we'll provide a more detailed response separately.
Okay, thank you for that, Kyle. A statement from Jeffrey, very excited for this to be completed. The chat seems to be full of negative energy, and I just wanted to share some positive thoughts for this project. Thank you, Jeffrey. We appreciate it. From Max, as a Ward 7 east of the river resident, I'm glad to have a low stress way to cross over to the Arboretum. I hope the connection on the western side will happen soon as well, so we can use the trail at more hours. And I'll take one more and then we'll jump to a hand raise. I believe we still have up. Marion says, please describe the plan for the trail on the west bank. I believe it's some background noise. So I'll just say, please describe the plan for the trail on the west bank, team.
As part of this project, trail on the west bank.
Sal, I'm sorry, you're low again. I just wanted to let you know before you went through everything.
Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
So as far as the trail goes for the west bank, we will be improving what is on Park Service property, and to the extent necessary to make the tie-in with the existing ground. So you might remember the trail there's a dirt path, right, that continues to the north some distance. We're not planning to planning to improve that whole length of trail. It will be improved up to the fence line with the Arboretum.
Okay, thank you for that. We are at the 5-minute mark. So let's jump to a hand raise question. Patrice, does Graylin still have his hand up? I believe D and Graylin actually are the 2 hand raises.
Yes, I don't see Dee's hand, but let me unmute Graylin. I don't know why I'm having a.
Are you able to unmute, Graylin?
Is he unmuted now?
Graylin, are you unmuted? Can you hear, can you speak?
Hi.
Yes.
I only put my hand up because there were a couple of people who had their hands up. You all were trying to unmute them, and they weren't able to speak. I don't know if they left the meeting or what. But as you all witnessed, it's a difficulty. There's a delay in the unmuting. And I'm trying to respond to the pop-up, and it's telling me I can't unmute myself. That's what the pop-up was saying. So I was waiting, so I'm hitting the button, unmute me, So I'm just saying that for the person trying to speak, they have to have patience and just hang in there, because the process isn't, it's not very smooth. There was several pop-ups repeatedly, and I just hung in there, and finally I was able to actually unmute myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for that comment. So we'll go back to the chat to just try to get one or two more questions in before our hard stop. Sarah, will the bridge be open only when the Arboretum is open? That doesn't seem super useful for cyclists to use if the access is limited. I think that was already answered, but any quick responses to that, team? Okay.
This is Kyle with DDOT. I'll just add that, yes, we hear your concern. And I want to emphasize that this is, again, part of a sequential build out of the Anacostia River Trail. And there is a plan to finish that connection to the west so that it is available regardless of the Arboretum's hours.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. A couple more statements. The National Arboretum is difficult to access, so I can appreciate having a bridge across the river. My main concern about the design is maintaining river navigation. The river is shallow with a lot of sediment buildup. Removing the middle bridge pillar would be ideal. Theoretically, we could also dredge the river, but that would cause some downstream sediment problems. Thank you, and I think this has been discussed before. We'll also have that in the FAQs. So excited for the bridge from Meredith. It will greatly increase connectivity and access for pedestrians and cyclists alike. Thank you, Meredith. Marion, Mike Alvino distributed a drawing of this project at a walk on Kenilworth Park with APACC. That drawing showed the trail continues south, hugging the riverbank to KPS. Is that part of this plan? Team, is that part of the plan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Stacy, I was getting myself unmuted. So this is Kyle with DDOT. Yeah, we've worked with, Michael and our bicycle team. That trail is not part of this particular project. There are discussions going on among DDOT, the National Park Service, DOEE, and DPR, Department of Parks and Recreation. So we don't have any details to share tonight, but I can say to your question, that is not part of this particular project.
Okay, one more question before we end, guys. We're at 8 o'clock, but will emergency vehicles be able to cross the bridge?
Joe, do you want to answer that?
Sure. The bridge was designed to allow for small small emergency type vehicles, but not not anything significant or highway loading. And I should clarify, it's designed for one vehicle, and there will be bollards on the bridge to limit unauthorized access.
All right, thank you for that, Joe. And thank you everyone for attending. We are at our 8 o'clock stop time. We again will take the questions that we have in the chat and include them in the frequently asked questions. So I just want to say again, thank you everyone for attending tonight. This concludes our presentation and question and answer session. We do wish all of you a very good night, and we will follow up shortly. If you have any questions in the meantime, within the 30-day period, please send them to me again. And my name is Stacy. My email address is stacee@tbaconnects.com. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.